I'm going to have to resend this link out to the public. So give me about 2 minutes, and then you guys can do what y'all do.
Thanks, Harold.
Is there a storm in Athens?
Not at all. Yep. Harold, are we live?
Yes, we are good to go.
Okay. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being with us here this evening. My name is Lawrence Harris. I'm the Chief of Community Engagement and Strategic Partnerships for the Clark County School District. We just want to thank you all for joining us this evening for the first of what we hope will be several town halls that we will be able to produce for you all to provide answers to questions and to make sure you all know all the amazing things we're doing to ensure that our students and faculty and staff are safe for this upcoming school year. Several reminders for the folks who are joining us live via YouTube. Just know that the chat on the YouTube, unfortunately, is not being monitored tonight, but if you do have any questions for our panelists, you can submit them at www.bit.ly/askccsd. Again, the chat that's on YouTube is not being monitored by our panelists, but you can submit a question by going to www.bit.ly/askccsd. In addition, for those of our Spanish speakers, para escuchar la reunión en español, por favor, visite este enlace youtube.be/QDIEGUEMNG. So that will get you to the Spanish link. So if you want to listen there, si tú quieres que escuchas, tú puedes. And that will be a great way for you to follow along in Spanish. And then for, of course, our speakers that would like to see or read and cannot hear us, we are doing closed captioning at the bottom of the screen. So we're excited to be with you all here tonight. We have some amazing panelists and experts who will talk you through our plans and answer questions for you. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our amazing interim superintendent, Dr. Sonona Thomas, who will welcome you all to our evening.
Good evening, everyone. We are so excited to have you join us for our town hall. We want to thank Mr. Harris and his amazing team for organizing this event for us this evening. We also want to thank each of you for being here and for being partners with us in Clark County School District. We appreciate your patience, your understanding, and the suggestions that many of you have provided regarding our next steps and how we can best support our students during these challenging times. We recognize that the current model that we are utilizing, which is virtual learning, is not ideal for everyone. And we also recognize that the alternative, if we were to go back face-to-face, is also not ideal, especially at this time. Our team is working diligently to ensure that the virtual school and virtual instructional resources meet the needs of all of our students. And I think you will hear that this evening from some of our presenters. And we're also making sure that the transition back to face-to-face instruction is done as safely as we can do it at a time when it is safe based on the guidance that we're receiving from other resources. We also have our social workers and our counselors and other school staff available to assist students with the social emotional components. We recognize that a pandemic of this nature is something that we have never faced, and it causes stress. We were talking as a group today and we were like, everyone's fuses are short, and we get that. It's the same thing happening at home for our families. And so we know that this is a challenging time, and we don't negate the social emotional needs that our students have. And we do have staff available that you can reach out to your schools for support for your students and your families during these times. The most important job that I hold, while I truly value being interim superintendent, but my most important job is that of mother. And I am a parent, so please know that I understand what you're feeling. My struggle may not be your struggle. I don't have to worry about childcare because of the age of my child, but I do have to worry about post-secondary options and what things will look like for her next year, and ensuring that she has this year to get where she wants to be next year. So I don't just look at each day that we face as an interim superintendent. I do bring the lens of parent, and I understand the challenges for parents during these times. And so please know that as a team, we do bring different perspectives, and we value those perspectives and the situations that it places many of our families in. Roy Bennett said, when things do not go your way, remember that every challenge, every adversity contains within it seeds of opportunity and growth. And as a district, that's what we are looking for. We're excited about what we're going to learn from this. We are exhausted, as many of you are, but each day is a new learning opportunity. And we believe that something good will come out of this for our students, for us as an organization, and how we practice as educators. So once again, welcome. Thank you for being amazing partners to the Clark County School District. We couldn't do this work without you. And we look forward to supporting our students virtually and getting them back home. Is what their principals feel like, and their teachers. We want them back home as quickly as possible as we can. We want to do that, though, also as safely as possible. But this time I turn it over to our wonderful board president, Dr. Lakeisha Gant.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas, and thank you, Mr. Harris. I do just want to say welcome on behalf of the school board. As president of the school board, as well as District 7 representative, and just knowing my colleagues on the board, I do know that we stand ready to support the district. With the board, it has been just as challenging as Dr. Thomas has said, really in trying to be sure that we're sharing as much information as possible. And so I do want to thank the team of individuals that are here tonight because they have been receptive. And I know that as many emails and as much information that they are receiving from the public, they are also receiving phone calls and information from us. And I do just want to acknowledge that these are challenging times. And there are no easy answers. And I want to echo what Dr. Thomas has said. In many ways, our lives sort of overlap in that we are both parents. And there are a variety of different situations and diversity in our district. And so I am very glad to hear that the ultimate goal is to have our children back among each other. And I also understand that that has to be done in a way that really mitigates as much risk as possible. So again, the board is supportive and stands ready to help and support in any way that we can. And I do thank you all for inviting me, Dr. Thomas and Mr. Harris. And I also thank those families that are able to listen, to continue to ask questions and sharing and to share as much information as possible.
Thank you, Dr. Gant. Thank you, Dr. Thomas. So for our viewers who are watching, who are attending tonight, again, thank you all for being an engaged community, for asking the tough questions, for pushing us to be the best educational leaders we can be so that we can make sure we serve your students, and our families appropriately. So for tonight, just so you know, although the chat on the YouTube page is not being monitored for our panelists, if you do have questions throughout the night, you can submit it on our forum. I just want to say that one last time at bit.ly/askccsd. That page will be monitored. I have the form pulled up here on my computer. And so if there are any questions that come in that I'm able to put towards our panelists that they can answer, I will. Also, if we're not able to get to all of your questions, I do want to say our community is very engaged. We've received well over 600 questions for tonight. And as you all can imagine, with this being the first of probably many of these type of events or several events, we're not going to be able to make it through 600 questions, but we will make sure we get to those most critical ones that we can today. And we will find opportunities to communicate the rest of those details out to you at a later time, because we want you all to know we're working really hard to bring your kids back safely. And so without further ado, I'm going to pass the torch to our amazing Director of Nursing, Amy Roark. She will give you all an update on where we are health-wise, and just so you know exactly what her department has been up to. Go for it, Amy.
Good evening. I'm Amy Roark. I'm the Director of Nursing for the Clark County School District, and I appreciate this opportunity tonight just to share some information with everyone as members of our community. I know we all have questions and concerns. So more than anything, I want to be clear that we, the school district, the reopening task force, are following DPH guidelines, CDC recommendations. We are updated on the recent recommendations from our local health officials, and we are taking those into consideration as we look to reopen schools. I have regular meetings with our local health authorities here in Athens-Clarke County, as well as at the state level. The state DPH has a chief deputy school nurse who is in regular contact with nurse leaders around the state. Due to my role as president-elect of the Georgia Association of School Nurses, I am regularly communicating with other school leaders across the state to figure out how different districts are handling different situations and what's going to work best here for us in Clark County. And also have had the very good fortune of being able to consult with some UGA epidemiologists, some local experts here in town who have advised me and provided research that I have been able to take back to the task force. The data that I have been able to pour over from the UGA epidemiology team has been invaluable to me. And in fact, one of the epidemiologists told me, Amy, honestly, you should start out every presentation by saying, the minute I say something, it's already wrong. And I think that that is indicative of the situation we all find ourselves in. It's constantly changing, it's unprecedented. And I can assure you that we are working as hard as we can to adapt and make the best decisions based on the information that we have at hand. As the chair of the Health and Safety Subcommittee, I made 4 recommendations for health non-negotiables back in the beginning of the summer when we started this work to the committee to the opening task force in regards to what we had to have in place in order to open schools for face-to-face instruction. The first one is supplies for disinfecting and cleaning our buildings and our buses. We cannot bring students back unless we have the supplies to do so. Staff, we need to make sure that we have staffing to appropriately support our students in the building, and that includes substitutes for when our regular staff get ill. We need the appropriate amount of PPE to protect our staff, to keep them safe at work during the day. And then finally, we need a plan. We need clear plans and clear processes in place for how to handle different situations that will arise as we come back face to face. So the Health and Safety Committee and the Opening Task Force in general has been working hard to ensure that we have all of those 4 health non-negotiables in place. But given that, we will never be able to mitigate all the risks that go along with returning to school in the middle of a viral pandemic. So we're going to start with the basics and ask parents and employees to keep their sick children at home and to stay home when you're sick. That seems very basic, but it's very, very important as we return to school face to face, is for sick children to stay at home and for sick employees to not report to work. When we do return face to face, we're really going to focus our efforts on things to minimize exposure within our buildings. So these include social distancing, which is a very important thing that we can do within our buildings, looking at our ventilation systems, our airflow, requiring face coverings regardless of social distancing when we're indoors and interacting with others, focusing education efforts around hand hygiene, respiratory etiquette, all of these kind of practicing prevention measures that will really help reduce exposures when we do come back together face to face. Ultimately, though, it's very important that we have a clear plan and process in place when we do return for how to handle positive COVID cases reported to our school community within our school community. And this is where it's really detailed, and I don't believe that time allows me this evening to go into all those details. However, I would encourage you to reach out to me if you have questions about the process in regards to when an employee or a student reports a positive case. It's very clearly delineated from the Department of Public Health, and there's a decision tree that we internally have created that will be shared with our principals and employees so that everybody's on the same page about what actions need to be taken. It is important that you understand the difference between quarantine and isolation when reviewing these DPH guidelines. And I will just briefly say that quarantine refers to people who have been exposed to the coronavirus, and isolation is referring to people who have been diagnosed with the coronavirus. So quarantine period is 14 days, and that's because the coronavirus has an incubation period of 14 days. So if you're exposed to it, there's a chance that you could become symptomatic within 14 days after exposure, which is why if somebody has been exposed, they need to stay home and quarantine at their house for 14 days if they've been determined a close contact of somebody who tested positive. Isolation is only 10 days from the onset of symptoms or the positive test. And that's because research from the DPH and CDC shows that COVID is, that somebody who has COVID is only infectious for a 12-day period. And that 12 days starts 2 days before the onset of symptoms and goes until 10 days after the onset of symptoms. So on day 10, people who have been diagnosed with COVID are no longer thought to be infectious and are okay to return to work given they've been without a fever for 24 hours and have recovering symptoms. There's a lot more details in those guidelines that I'd be happy to address and when I have more time. So our goal ultimately is to bring students back in the building as soon as we safely can. Everybody on the task force is working towards that common goal, and we understand the importance of getting students back face to face. The question is, when can we safely do so? And the even bigger question is, how do we know when it's safe to do so? And that's what we have been trying to answer and figure out with collaboration from our local health officials. So there's a couple things the CDC recommends to look at. They recommend taking into consideration the true importance of in-person education and its effect and impact on social, emotional, and academic growth and the well-being of students. So that is first and foremost what our task force is taking into consideration when we look to reopen schools face-to-face. The second thing they recommend is the level of community transmission, and this is very important. The level of community transmission right now is widespread. There are a couple different factors that we can use to determine that. Most recently, the DPH has put out a 14-day trend, which is what we need to pay attention to here locally in Clark County. You know, are we increasing or decreasing in our cases and in our positivity rate? We'd like to see a positivity rate of less than 5%. We'd like to see a cases per 100,000 of less than 100 to be considered out of the widespread transmission zone. And as of today, 420 cases per 100,000 in the last 14 days. Like I said, we'd like that to be under 100 for a safe face-to-face reopening. Yesterday we had 390. So we are trending up at the moment, but we will keep an eye on those numbers and look for a decreasing trend as well as safe numbers that might indicate we could plan for a face-to-face return. The other thing we have to take into consideration is the number of cases affecting our actual school community. How many teachers and staff and students are testing positive within our individual schools. We're going to use DPH guidance. And then the most important thing is how can we cohort our children in our schools and minimize our exposure? So if we have a class of 10 children and we have them together all day, but sitting greater than 6 feet apart in a classroom and not changing classes in the hallways or going to recess or eating in the cafeteria with other students, then if one of them tests positive, it's possible that the rest of them don't have to go home and quarantine, or we could just quarantine that one cohort of students. But if we have students interacting across the schools with multiple students and classes and teachers, then it's going to be really hard to mitigate the exposure in that situation because it will be exponential. So the good news is that the Clark County School District has increased all part-time school nursing positions to full-time, which means that every student in every school across the district will have access to a full-time school nurse. These nurses are in the process of being trained by Johns Hopkins as contact tracers, and we will be taking all of our contact tracing and case investigation of COVID in-house. So if there's somebody in a school community that reports a positive case, the school nurse will call and follow up on that to make sure that we don't have other exposures in our building. And if we do, letters will be sent home to notify the family, the parent, the employee of the exposure, as well as provide DPH guidelines for what they need to do in light of that exposure. So I know I've gone over my time. Lawrence, thank you for not muting me. And thank you for this opportunity to speak with everybody. I would encourage you to reach out to me if anybody has additional questions. My email is roark@clark.k12.ga.us, and I am happy to answer additional questions at any time. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you for that update. I know your team has been hard at work since March, since this all began, in constant contact with the CDC and DPH and all of your contacts. We appreciate the work you're doing to make sure we keep our students and our staff safe. Like Amy said, if there are questions, I appreciate you doing that. She put her email out there, roark@clark.k12.ga.us. She very much means it. Please reach out to her if you have questions about health guidelines and where we are, why we've had to make certain decisions based off of just ensuring that all of our students are safe. So Amy is our top-notch nurse on top of this. As you all can imagine, though, we've had to make a lot of changes and adjustments to our school building, to our operations because of COVID-19 pandemic. So we've had to do a lot of different things in our schools, our transportation and nutrition department. And so I'm going to pass the torch over to Mr. Dexter Fisher. He's our chief of operations, who will give us an update on where his team has been working to make sure our school facilities are safe and the operations side is ready to go. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Lawrence. I appreciate it. And also, I thank the community for tuning in and giving us the opportunity to talk about our school. The first thing that we did when we shut down our schools, we went in and assessed all our buildings, looked at from an HVAC standpoint. How we were going to transport our students, also how we were going to feed our students, and also how we were going to provide technology for our students. So one of the things that we've been doing right now, and I'll start with our all of our custodian staff. We started that process over 2 months ago, getting them ready to be prepared for when our students do get ready to come back to school. One thing that we have done, we have purchased right now over 40,000 face masks, 1,765 gallons of hand sanitizers, 700 safety shields, 500 containers of disinfectant wipes, 300 shoe covers and clothing, We also have put out signage in our schools to make sure that when people approach our schools, they'll know to put on a mask or to wash their hands properly. We also will be putting signs in the hallways so our students can know what direction they will need to go when they're transitioning out of their class. Also, GEMA has also provided a lot of PPE for us. They just sent us close to 567 gallons of hand sanitizer and also 15,000 more face covering. So we have started that process. We will be deploying devices to grade K through 2. Those devices have been ordered. iPads for K and 1 are beginning to arrive. Now we do have a back order, and we'll get those in soon. We're gonna also order computers for our parapros to make sure they have access also. From a plant services standpoint, and one thing that we talked about, and Amy mentioned it briefly about our HVAC system, our air ventilation. One of the things that we have already done, and we've changed out all our filters. We're cleaning all our cooling coils. We make sure that all fresh air continues to flow throughout. We're doing that, and we're constantly checking our buildings and HVAC systems at all times, make sure that fresh air is flowing through our schools. From a transportation standpoint, one of the things that we're doing, all our trainers, our bus drivers and our monitors are getting trained for us when we pick up students. A bus driver will provide a mask for them. We'll also be doing daily cleaning of our buses on a daily basis. We'll wipe down spots on the areas that children may touch on a continuous basis. Also make sure that once we get kids to school, that when they arrive at the school, that they'll have the face mask and be prepared for learning when they go into their classes. One thing I didn't cover with our custodian staff, we will be cleaning our building from a sanitation standpoint. So our buildings will get cleaned on a continuous basis. I want to talk a little bit about food nutrition. Presently, we have fed over 600, well, we have delivered over 600,000 meals to our community. This month.
Hey, Dexter.
Yes.
Sorry to stop you. Your sound has been messing up, so it's actually going in and out. And I'm not sure what to do to fix it, but unfortunately, we're only able to hear you every couple words. So if you're okay, I may have to unfortunately pivot for now, and then maybe we can see what's going on with it so we can try to fix it, and you can finish your presentation in the end if that's okay.
Okay, I can change and go to my laptop if I need to.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, we can do this, the final two presentations. And if you want to switch to your laptop during that time, then that way we can go back. But yeah, it's going in and out, so we're not able to hear everything you're saying. And I feel like we probably missed some of the critical information you were giving.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. No, I appreciate it. I do want to make sure everyone knows, I know that there was I have folks sending me messages. We did repost the link for those who were on the first YouTube channel. So hopefully, I know some of our community members out there have been gracious. I appreciate you for sharing it with your friends and your peers. Please just know the link was different than the initial one shared out, but we did repost it right around 5:32. So just please look out for that new link so you know the information. For those who are just joining us, we are going through our final 2 to 3 presentations, and then we're going to have questions towards the end. So bear with us as we finish through our presentations to give you the information you're asking for. Again, the form is back live, so bit.ly/askccsd. Like I said at the beginning, we did receive a little over 600 questions, and I see we're actually already at 770. So I see a lot of questions are being submitted tonight, which is great. I think, nothing like, we want our community to be active and engaged. These are questions that we want to be able to answer. We want to be pushed to be our best, so we appreciate your engagement. While Mr. Fisher works on his laptop, I'm going to go ahead and pass the torch to our Chief Academic Officer, Mr. Brandon Gaskins, who will give you all an overview of the instructional program. Mr. Gaskins.
Let me unmute myself. Thank you, Lawrence. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay. So again, Lawrence, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity just to update our community and our families around what September 8th will look like and what school will look like moving forward. So some of the overarching topics that I wanted to communicate to our families is around our instructional schedules, specifically around our bell schedules with the Office of Early Learning, our elementary, middle school, and high school, as well as talk about lunchtime and what that will look like. I want to also talk a little bit about our learning platform. We are a Google Suite district. Talk about our video conferencing options, and then also talk a little bit about diagnostic informative assessment system that we will be utilizing. And then I think what is really important is that our teachers came back last Monday, and they will have about 5 weeks of professional learning with an additional week to really just get started and focus on welcoming families back. But I want to talk to our families and our community about what our teachers are engaged in so they are prepared for our students when they return. So the first item is our instructional schedules. We've worked with our principals as well as our district leaders. These are draft times. Our elementary school principals, they meet tomorrow to finalize this schedule, but this is a draft, but we want to make sure that families are aware of what the bell time will look like. So our early childhood, our Office of Early Learning, our elementary schools, we will engage in instruction from 8:30 to 3 p.m. each day. Well, Monday through Thursday, with Friday being a total digital day that schools will work with families around that content, with lunch being from 11 to 12 p.m. Our secondary schools, middle schools, and our high schools will start at 9 o'clock, and then they will end at 3:30 p.m. with, again, the universal lunch being from 11 to 12 o'clock for all students in our district. A couple of notes that I want to just make sure that we add is that schools will provide synchronous, meaning live instruction, and asynchronous instruction, recorded instruction for those families that need it. And then there will be a nice balance of independent work assignments for students. So we believe wholeheartedly that we want to make school as normal as possible. We want to have regular schedules, but we do realize that having students sit on a video conference platform for the entire day is not developmentally appropriate for our students or for our adults. So we will have a digital learning team, which will be comprised of teachers. That kickoff will be on Monday. Our principals are recommending those individuals right now to help us define what synchronous, asynchronous, and independent work assignments look like for our students. The second bullet, I just want to note that schools will work with families that need instruction outside of the regular school hours. So we acknowledge that some families will not be at home during the day to provide instruction for their families. And we realize that some of our at-risk students or students that are in most need really want to have that face-to-face instruction, but may not be able to do that if their parent is at work or they are at home with a grandparent that may not be able to support them during the day. So schools will be able to make some exceptions and accommodations to support students with live instruction outside of the regular school day. The other thing that I've already mentioned and alluded to, but I just want to make sure that we're very clear, is that screen time will be limited to support the developmental needs of our students. We do not desire to keep our students in synchronous instruction all day. So we will help our teachers and our families balance that by providing synchronous, asynchronous, and independent work that is developmentally appropriate for all of our students. So when we look at professional learning, I skipped something. I knew that wasn't the time for that. So learning platforms is also another important part of our distance and digital learning. We are a Google Suite district, so we have Google applications. And so Google Classroom will be our learning management system. So there's a lot of talk about management systems and a need for a management system. Google Classroom can really meet our needs. That is something that we already have. That is something that we are very familiar with. A part, as we research learning platforms that is missing from Google Classroom is the communication aspect with families, but we believe that Infinite Campus can help us meet those communication needs. So again, Google Classroom will be our LMS. For our video conferencing, we will provide Zoom and Google Meet for our teachers. Zoom is free for educators at this time. When the free subscription has ended, we are in conversations with making sure that there is some continuity. So schools will be able to continue to use Zoom, and as a district, we will try to provide the funds to do that. Infinite Campus, again, we will use Infinite Campus for grading as we would normally do, and Infinite Campus for communication with our families. So we don't want our families to have another digital platform to learn about their student grades or to get information from their teacher as some other learning management systems require. We will continue to communicate with our families through Infinite Campus. The fourth bullet is about the diagnostic informative assessment system. We really want to make sure that we are monitoring the academic growth and needs of our students. So we will be able to administer a diagnostic assessment from home. We will have assessments that assess standards mastery, so we can see how our students are progressing and mastering standards that they are taught in a virtual environment. And we will provide interim benchmark assessments just to make sure that our teaching is accommodating the learning of our students. The last part is we have purchased a diagnostic informative assessment system, which is iReady. We will use iReady, and some schools have elected to continue using MAP. So principals will communicate with their families as well as their teachers around their decision on iReady or MAP. But iReady does provide a personalized instruction for remediation and acceleration. So students will be able to work independently at home based on their level. So if you have a fifth grader that is 2 or more years behind, the system will provide them with the needed remediation to catch them up, which is independent, which is won't need the support of the teacher or the adult. Or if you have a fifth grader that is working 2 grade levels above, iReady will be able to provide the appropriate acceleration for those students. And just the last part, which I think is so important, and I just want to publicly just thank my team as well as Amy Peacock, who is our coordinator of professional learning. We have really pivoted to make sure that we have provided just really good professional learning for our staff as we lead up to opening school. So Heidi Hill and Tessa Barbazan and their teams worked on social emotional learning, professional learning yesterday and today. So our social emotional learning is really focusing on staff and student social emotional learning. We want our staff to take care of themselves. So when we do open school in a virtual environment and eventually in a face-to-face environment, our staff, they feel centered, they feel supported, so they can support our students. And that training happened just over these last 2 days. We will later this month have some training with the Distance Learning Playbook. This is a book series by Doug Reeves, who also has provided us with some training around professional learning communities. Our principals, assistant principals, instructional coaches, and media specialists, as well as the entire instructional services and school performance team, will engage in this training. Some of the topics that are included in the Distance Learning Playbook centers on the first days of school, so how you create rituals and routines in a virtual environment. Another topic is teacher clarity at a distance. So this is going to help us make sure that teachers are communicating clearly to students what the expectation is in a digital environment. And then the last topic, and there's probably 8 topics, I just shared 3, is planning instructional units for distance learning. So as Amy and Dr. Thomas said earlier, we want to get students back in school as early as possible. but we also want to make sure that if this extends, that we have some really good units that lend themselves to distance learning. The last professional learning that we have is digital learning, professional learning, and this is for all instructional staff. So all of our teachers will participate in a self-paced professional learning that will help them feel more comfortable and be prepared to serve our students in a digital environment. Our media specialists and some of our teachers who are part of our CIA program, which is a instructional ambassador program around technology, have created this professional learning for all of our teachers. So module 1 will focus on gearing up for digital learning. And in this module, the first lesson is about taking care of yourself and your well-being. So this module is all about the teacher and the teacher being prepared emotionally and centered to teach our students. Module 2 will focus on asynchronous learning, and that's going to include more content around Google Classroom and then encouraging asynchronous collaboration of our students. And then module 3 will be synchronous learning, and that's going to help teachers understand the options for video conferencing and then also collaborating with students in a synchronous learning environment. So this is a great time in instructional services and school performance around really pouring into teachers. And we know that when we really invest in our teachers, it's an investment in our students. So thank you, Lawrence, for this time. And as Ms. Rorick said, there is so many other things that we want to discuss and dive into, and hopefully we'll have that opportunity to give our communities more information as we get closer to the start of school. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gaskins, for that update from the Office of Instructional Services and School Performance. I know Mr. Fisher is back with us, but for this, just so we stay in line with instruction, we'll have Ms. Heidi Hill, who is our Executive Director of Special Education and Behavior Supports, present, and then we'll go back to Mr. Fisher to finish his presentation, and we'll open the floor for questions. So, Ms. Hill, I will share your presentation, and we can begin.
Heidi, you're muted. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Gaskins. Thank you. So again, I'm Heidi Hill. I'm the Executive Director of Special Education with and Behavior Supports for Clark County. And I'm excited to be here this evening and excited to collaborate in this way and to partner and to hopefully provide you with some information based on the questions and the feedback that we've received thus far. So the first thing I want to share with you out of transparency is that we did a survey. And in the survey results that you can see on this screen, I know there's a lot of information in this survey. But what I really want to point out, and I'm only putting this up here really out of transparency to show that we reached out to parents of students with disabilities and asked them to give us their feedback so that we could help have that information inform next steps. We serve, we had 236 parents respond, and that's about 10% of our population that we serve. I want to point out that the main concerns about halfway down the screen, the first one is safety. Overwhelmingly, the response was, I'm concerned about returning my child and my child being safe. The other concerns were just quality of the virtual instruction, the provision of FAPE to access to the accommodations and progress in the IEP goals and objectives and access to related services. And so based on, those are the concerns that we have received at this time. So then the question becomes, okay, so what does the next steps look like? What do we do in terms of, the timeline for next steps? And so we met with team leaders last week, and we've asked that caseload managers begin contacting parents of students with disabilities beginning this week and continuing into next. We've asked for virtual learning plan meetings to be scheduled for all students with disabilities and for these meetings to occur between August 12th and September 4th. And we've asked for the current IEP to be reviewed and individual services discussed during this virtual learning plan meeting. We've also asked that special education teachers, we've also included special education teachers in conversations as we consider options available for service delivery during continued virtual learning. So I think it's important to share that once teachers return on contract, that we have actively engaged in conversations with them, and we are continuing to explore all the possible options and how we can how we can make services, virtual services this fall look very different than they did in the spring. So I just want to convey that we're aware of concerns, we agree with concerns from services in the spring, and that we're working diligently to change those services to make them be more appropriate to meet the needs of our students. So in continuation with this, we're going to be asking for students will be assigned a check-in time with their case manager once a week, and that this will be scheduled during the virtual learning plan meeting. We've asked for special ed teachers to basically be available to offer academic assistance or tutoring, and that students and parents will be notified when these virtual tutoring hours will be held. And we've asked for caseload managers that they're going to continue to monitor progress on goals and objectives during virtual learning. Behavior supports are also a concern that we're hearing from parents. And please know that if a student has a documented behavior concern in their IEP, the virtual learning plan team will address how these services will be implemented in the virtual environment. So for example, behavior specialists, they can be assigned to support both students and their families. They can be working to partner with parents to basically do plans, and just know that whatever behavior supports a child needs, that will be a conversation that occurs during the virtual learning plan meeting. So many questions. I think 50 questions were sent my way, and the majority of them have to do specifically to FAPE. FAPE, of course, stands for Free Appropriate Public Education. And lots of questions surrounding how are you going to ensure that my child with a disability receives FAPE? And so some of the ways that we will ensure, we will have special education teachers assigned to work with students who are accessing instruction virtually to ensure that the virtual learning plans are implemented. We will have group and individual instruction. It will be designed to address IEP goals and objectives that are identified in the virtual learning plan. This could also include small group sessions that are designed to target common goals, objectives, additional work tasks, and/or individualized activities. So the other piece that's going to be very different is this from the spring. In the spring, we didn't have a common schedule. And as Mr. Gaskins just shared, there is a proposed schedule, or he shared a schedule outline of what we're proposing in terms of having every elementary, every middle, every high have the same schedule. And so with that schedule, we will be mirroring the services for students. So for example, if the child is receiving 60 minutes a day of small group reading instruction, then if we have to pivot to one-on-one, then they might get a 15-minute day segment in the online platform. But our goal is that if they're receiving 60 minutes a day of reading instruction in a class, that we're going to pivot to 60 minutes a day of small group reading instruction virtually. And so that will carry over from one to the other. The other, another aspect of FAPE is that students enrolled in virtual learning activities, again, they're going to follow that same schedule and be expected to log in for that class time in whatever the model is in terms of synchronous or asynchronous, but have access to that lesson. They're going to be able to interact with other students and the teacher assigned to teach that course, and they're going to be able to reach out and receive individualized support from their instructor. So just as if this was a class and if I could interact with all of you, which I can't, but we would be able to interact, and it's possible, and it's the expectation that if it's a collaborative classroom, that there be two teachers in that space supporting those students. So in terms of implementation of services, all services agreed on during the virtual learning plan will be implemented virtually. So in terms of face-to-face services, so with face-to-face services that are currently agreed on in students' IEPs, the teams will be going through all of those services and discussing them one by one during the virtual learning plan meeting. And then the committee will decide how each service can best be provided virtually. So for example, if a student receives direct math instruction, they may continue to receive the direct math instruction virtually. Again, students are going to be running a real-time educational schedule with class times that they remain the same as their typical peers. And all teachers serving a student with an IEP or 504 will be provided a copy of their virtual learning plan so that they're aware of the accommodations and they will receive that support and that interaction from the caseload manager to support students. We've received a lot of questions about speech services, and speech services really align with all the information that I've just shared. But please know that in the spring, we did begin teletherapy with some of our students who receive speech services, and we will be extending that this fall to all students who have speech services on their IEP, and small group sessions will still be provided. So, and again, the delivery model will be discussed during the creation of the virtual learning plan, whether an individual session or a group session is most appropriate to meet the needs of the child. Parents will also be provided with resources in addition to the direct teletherapy services. And we will also see speech as speech and language pathologists pushing into the virtual classroom to basically support students real time when they're accessing content. Related services are all of those services like occupational therapy, physical therapy, vision impairments, and orthopedic impairments. And they will also receive those services. And again, I know I keep going back to that it will be documented in the virtual learning plan, but that's going to be the vehicle or the document that a team collaborates on with the parent, part of that process, and where the services are discussed. So again, these services will be determined during the virtual learning plan meeting. Hospital homebound, so lots of questions. We still have hospital homebound? We will definitely still have hospital homebound services. The paperwork is still in place. Ms. Rourke, is still the point person to document the medical conditions. The piece with hospital homebound is that we still need the same certification that's required for any child who is is having medical needs that would not allow them access to the classroom or in a typical way. So and I've just addressed on that top, the second bullet I would like to point out though, if a student qualified for hospital homebound services prior to COVID school closures, then that qualification is still in place. If the pandemic in and of itself would not necessarily qualify a child for hospital homebound, but again, all of those decisions, even if a child is eligible for hospital homebound, it's still going to be deferred back to the IEP team, which in this case would be the virtual learning plan team, to determine appropriate services based on the medical condition. So the key component here, virtual learning plans. And I know I probably have said those 3 words on every single slide. The bottom line is that no 2 students are the same. And so what is considered a free and appropriate education for one student, those services will not be the same for the next. And so the district will ensure students are provided access to their free and appropriate public education during virtual instruction through the creation of virtual learning plans. So we are committed to partnering with parents of students with disabilities to ensure services are provided and the appropriate supports in place to help all students be successful. But the best way to address these needs again and have your questions answered is during your individual virtual learning plan meeting. But we are also committed to bringing students safely back to school as soon as possible. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you for that, Heidi. I appreciate the update. I appreciate you also having basically covered 50 questions in a PowerPoint presentation. For our viewers out there, if I know it's probably questions around how are we going to answer all 670 plus questions. We will not be able to answer all 670 tonight, But as you can see, what Ms. Hill did in her presentation is she, wanted to capture as many questions that she received for her special education department. And of course, if you have questions, I'm sure she's open to you reaching out to her. But like she said, during those virtual individual planning meetings, that's when a lot of your questions will be answered around serving students with disabilities. So we appreciate you, Ms. Hill, for that. I'm going to pivot back to Mr. Fisher, who I believe is back with us to give us the final part of his update, and then we will shift over to questions to our panelists.
Thank you, Lawrence, and I apologize to the community that I was fading in and out. I'm in my office, so I thought that would be sufficient, but now I'm on my laptop and we'll try this again. Quickly, if you did miss any of my presentation, one thing I do want to talk about from an operations standpoint, our custodian staff has been trained already to deal with the COVID-19, and we also will be training our teachers. We have purchased PPEs for all of our staff. I mentioned 40,000 face masks, 1,700 gallons of hand sanitizer, 700 safety goggles, 300 face shields, 500 containers of disinfectant wipes. We'll also be getting supplies from GEMA. They have supplied a number of face masks, hand sanitizers, and foggers. So we're waiting for that PPE to come in, and we will be using that. From a technology standpoint, we will be deploying devices to grade K through 2. Those devices have been ordered. We will have iPads for K and 1, and those devices have already started to arrive. Our Chromebooks for second graders are on back order, and that's a nationwide problem, but we'll continue to work that out. Also, we're in the process of purchasing laptops for our parapros also. From a transportation standpoint, one of the things that we've been doing with our bus drivers and our monitors is we've been training them on how to sanitize their buses. Our bus drivers and monitors will be wearing face covering, they'll be wearing face shields and gloves. For our students, when they arrive at the bus stop, if they don't have on a face covering, we will provide a face covering for them. Also, we will have hand sanitizers on our bus. We also will be cleaning our buses on a daily basis after each trip that our bus drivers take. From an HVAC standpoint, we'll continue to change out our filters. We also will be cleaning our air cores, and also we will be monitoring our airflow in all our buildings. And our plan is to make sure that we have positive and fresh air blowing through all our buildings. From a school nutrition perspective, over this summer, we have served over 600,000 meals to our students in the community. We will continue to do that until the end of this month. Once we go to virtual education on September 8th, we will continue to feed our kids in the communities. So we're gonna continue that process, and we have not worked out the schedule yet, but that schedule is forthcoming. We will get it out to the community as soon as possible. So again, like the rest of my colleagues, if you have any questions or any concerns that you may have, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be more than happy to respond to any of your emails or questions. Thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Mr. Fisher. And I'm glad we were able to get your update. I think it was really important for our community to hear from us as far as what changes we're making to our school environment, nutrition, our buildings, our transportation to keep their children and our staff safe. Just as a reminder, again, we received questions beforehand, so many of our panelists were able to craft their update that they just shared through those questions. I'm now going through to our live questions and looking at what were able to prepare beforehand, and I'll be asking our panelists several questions. I do just want to remind our Spanish speakers, para escuchar la reunión en español, por favor, visite su channel del YouTube. So go to our YouTube channel. You'll be able to watch it in Spanish there. We have a live translator. And I do want to give a personal shout out to my executive assistant, Angela, who is in the background doing closed captioning for us. This is her first time, and I think she's doing a wonderful job. So I'm always going to pat someone in the back when they're doing good work. So we're going to move forward to questions. I'm going to pull up the questions for our panelists, and then we will get started. So we have a question around devices. Will CCSD provide devices for all students to accommodate virtual learning? Dexter, it sounds like it's a question for you.
Yes, we will provide devices for all our students. As I mentioned earlier, we have a back order on our Chromebooks, but we're expecting them in soon. On the Chromebooks back order, that's a nationwide problem. So, but we will provide laptops, iPads for all our students in K through 12.
Thank you, sir. Quick follow-up is how does a student exchange their laptop that is not working for replacement to use for remote learning?
One of the things that we will do once our principals and teachers will return, schools will put out information about when the parent can come and get their laptops or get their Chromebooks exchanged, and we can do that at their respective schools. We'll work closely with the media specialists at those schools. We'll make sure we can exchange those out, or if the laptops need fixing, we'll repair those and make sure we get those back to our students.
Thank you, sir. Our next question, will the students be participating in synchronous or asynchronous learning? I believe you may have answered this, Mr. Gaskins, but do you mind just answering it one more time?
Not a problem, Mr. Harris. Yes, we will be participating in both synchronous and asynchronous learning. I would just qualify that we're trying to ensure that there is a balance between those two. As I said in my presentation, it is not our desire to have students online all day, but we do want to make sure that our teachers are providing good whole group instruction, then allowing students to work independently. And then I would just want to go back to the questions that were posed for Mr. Fisher as it relates to synchronous and asynchronous learning. So we are making sure that the devices that we have and the applications that we use are compatible. We did have a couple of issues with some apps working on our iPads. So all of the applications and additional digital resources that we are purchasing will work on our devices, our Chromebooks and our iPads for those students in K through second grade. And then just letting the community know that we did a math textbook and resource adoption this summer, and we added the digital resources as well. So those digital resources will have a lot of asynchronous resources for our parents and our students to use. So we're just really excited that we were able to purchase with board approval and support those asynchronous additional resources for our students to use on their devices.
Thank you, Mr. Gaskins. We appreciate it. This next question looks like it's probably going to be for you, Amy. What is the protocol when a staff member tests positive or exhibits symptoms while working on site?
Sure. When a staff member tests positive, they will report that test result to their supervisor and the school nurse, and they will be sent home to isolate per DPH guidelines, and the school nurse will follow up with them quickly, immediately, to determine if there were any other potential exposures in the building. And what we're looking for is if there were other employees or students who have been deemed close contacts. Close contacts specifically are folks who spent 15 minutes or longer within 6 feet of the employee who tested positive. Anybody who is determined to be a close contact will be sent home per DPH quarantine guidelines. Everybody will be notified of their potential exposure via email, phone call from the school nurse, or letter.
Thank you. That seems like a good chance to go to this question since we're talking staff. Lynn, Ms. Duke, will high-risk teachers be allowed to teach from home?
Yes, they will, for as long as we can let them. We need their doctor to send us a note that says what the condition is. And then, certainly during the time we're all virtual, they will be allowed to teach from home. And when students start to come back to in-person, we're going to probably have to be a little creative. We want them to be able to stay at home as long as they feel like they need to. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure that happens.
Okay. Follow up. I'm sorry, I have a follow-up for you. If a teacher is absent, will there be substitutes or will class be canceled?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. We have substitutes. We've hired additional, as most of you know, we have a contract company that handles our subs now, and they have been hiring substitutes all summer long. And we are also going to allow them to participate in some of that digital self-paced training, professional learning that Mr. Gaskins was referring to earlier in his presentation. So we want them to be as prepared as they can. And we're going to allow them, if they need to come inside our buildings to be that sub. And so we'll see what happens. Hopefully we will have enough, but we're in the middle of a viral pandemic. So we'll just have to cross that bridge when we get there.
Thank you. That's good. Our next question, and thank you all. Thank you, community, for submitting questions. You're an active group. Will students new to a school, kindergarten, 6th, 9th, or to the district, get a virtual tour of their new school? Mr. Gaskins, do you think you can answer this one for us?
I think I can, Mr. Harris, but I think this will be a collaboration between my office and your office. I don't think that is something that we considered, so I really appreciate the question of a virtual tour. I think we could work with your office in communications with helping our schools create virtual tours for their kindergarten, 6th grade, 9th grade, I would say pre-K in there as well. I mean, I would really say anyone that just wants to feel very confident about returning to school, just not those new students, but any student that is returning back to school to see what their classroom looks like, to see what the playground looks like. So eventually when we get back to school, they can take advantage of that playground. That is not something that we have considered. We are meeting with our principals weekly, as you know. I think that is a great idea that we can bring forward for them to plan. We do want our schools to have the autonomy to plan their open houses in a way that supports and meets the needs of their school community. But I definitely think some district support with providing students with a virtual tour is something that we should and can do.
Good, thank you. And I'm happy to work together. We can make it happen. There's a follow-up question. It's not related, but this seems like a good question for you as well. Is what PL, I believe you also covered this in your presentation, but what PL will teachers be given to support their digital instruction? If you could just briefly go back over that real quick.
Right. You know, one of the major things that we do throughout the summer is plan professional learning for our teachers in a regular non-pandemic year. And I think that we've done a really good job with providing professional learning around our math adoption, professional learning around our new reading materials at middle school, and some of the math things that we have at high school as well. In those adoptions and in those trainings that we had a writing institute for our writing curriculum for K through 8th grade, and digital instruction and support was embedded in all of those trainings. A lot of our vendors and our partners were able to pivot very, very quickly to help our teachers understand how to use those materials and resources in a digital environment. As I said earlier, and what Ms. Duke alluded to, is that starting on Monday, we will have a self-paced course around teaching in a digital environment. That course is being developed in partnership with members of our RESA, which is our professional learning collaboration for our area of districts in the North East Georgia region. But this training has been developed with our RESA, with our media specialists, and with some of our model teachers. We call them our CIA, which is our Clark Innovation Academy members. So they have spent this week and some of last week developing this self-paced course. So all teachers are aware of the digital resources that we have in our schools. And then not only knowing how to use those, but really knowing how to leverage those tools to really have engaging instruction. So that will start on Monday, and it's a 3-week self-paced course that our teachers and our substitute teachers will be able to engage in.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. So we have a question around a custodian checklist. So what is the custodian checklist for cleaning while teachers are in the building without students? Mr. Fisher, can you take that question? Custodian checklist for cleaning?
Sure, thank you, Lawrence. So one of the things that we're gonna do when our teachers are in the building, we're gonna put our custodian staff in different zones. Because we don't have students in the building, they'll still be required to make sure they take care of the restrooms, what we call high touch spots in the school buildings. And then once those teachers leave that classroom, we'll go in and sanitize that particular classroom. And during the course of the day, again, we're gonna make sure that we're cleaning areas that is not being occupied by our teachers to make sure we keep those areas sanitized. So the way we used to clean is gonna be a lot different than what we're doing now because of the pandemic. So we'll make sure that we'll touch those areas, and when those areas are occupied, and once people leave, then we'll go ahead and sanitize those particular areas once the building is vacated.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Ms. Duke, I actually have a question for you here. Are all district office staff being asked to return to their offices at the same time as teachers are returning to schools, or will they be working remotely?
Yes, all staff are being asked to start a hybrid schedule on Monday. That includes teachers and central office staff. Then when students are coming back for instruction, that's what we're going to call it, I guess. When they're back for instruction, then central office staff will be working full time, 5 days a week, like the teachers will be. I mean, let me say that correctly. We're all working 5 days a week right now on site. They will be back in the office.
7 days, Lynn. We're all working 7 days a week at this point.
Healthy work-life balance, right?
Our work has become life. I appreciate that. So we have a question around what will distance learning look like for elementary schools? Brandon, do you mind tackling that one?
Not at all, Lawrence. Some of the feedback that we've received is that we want elementary schedules to be as normal as possible, meaning that they have a full day. But the other side of that is that they're not spending a full day online. So we will be working on scheduling that includes a balance of synchronous, asynchronous, and independent work. The nuance of being in elementary school, and I will add this for our Office of Early Learning and Pre-K, is that pre-K through second grade looks a lot different from 3 through 5. So those schedules will be a little different. We would imagine that our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students are a little more independent. I want to be realistic. I was a elementary school teacher as well as a principal. Our 3rd graders don't come in as independent as we want them. So we'll phase that independence in as appropriate. But we will try to mimic a full day with with frequent breaks. So students are not worn out, parents are not worn out from a student being online all day. But we know that the best instruction is that whole group instruction where our teachers provide guidance and doing that, the opening of the lesson. So we're really trying to make sure that at least for 20 minutes per subject, that our elementary students, as appropriate, receive 15 to 20 minutes of whole group instruction, and then they can work independently where they turn off their screens or shut down their computers and then log back on. We have created some guardrails and some guidance for our schools. We know that our teachers and our principals know their communities better than us. We want to make sure that we are teaching the standards and utilizing our resources, but we will leave the autonomy about when math happens, when social studies happens, how those things look up to the school.
Thank you. Thank you for all those details too. A lot of great information there. You're going to be the king of follow-ups because you have a follow-up question.
Okay.
Mr. Gaskins, will standardized testing be a requirement for the upcoming year?
Okay, that is a hot button question. So we've asked, or not we, but the state government, our superintendent, our state superintendent, as well as our governor, has asked for a waiver for standardized testing. So that includes milestones testing, the EOG at our elementary level, and the EOC at our high school level. So we've asked for a waiver. We have not been updated on that waiver yet. With the waiver, it would also include some other assessments. GKIDS is in consideration of that. Access testing is also in consideration of that. That is very important to me as well as teachers and families. So once we have that information, we will definitely share that information with all of our families. I think the other part of that question, at least for me, if we don't have standardized testing, how are we ensuring that our students are growing academically? And how do we ensure that in a virtual environment that we're closing achievement gaps and we're preparing them for the next school year? We will use those diagnostic assessments that I mentioned earlier. We will have our standards mastery and our interim benchmark assessments that are less high stakes for students, less stress for students and teachers, but we do want to make sure that our students are progressing academically and we have some data points to support that. So we hope that standardized testing, that we get some grace and not have to administer those this year, but we do want to still make sure that we are administering some diagnostic assessments. And I know this question wasn't asked, Lawrence, but I'm going to just take some professional privilege. Around SAT and ACT, we know that schools have waived that requirement at some of neighboring universities and universities across the state. I just want to be very clear that a lot of our students, like myself, have gone to college on scholarship. And the way that these kids are going to get scholarships is based on their SAT and ACT scores. So even if a school waives that requirement, I would still encourage our students to continue to take those SAT, ACT prep classes, because if you were a child like me, my mom said, you can go to college if you can find the money to pay for it. And my SAT score helped me get there. So it's great that students can still be accepted to schools without an SAT or ACT score, but I would encourage our families to stay the course and prepare and follow through with taking those assessments.
Thank you. Actually, that was a really good pivot. So I would say you did good. I didn't have to ask you that question. So that's a good one. And I agree. Thank you. And definitely families looking to the SAT, ACT. It's definitely something that's needed for scholarships. We have a question around, why do guidelines repeatedly refer to social distancing where possible when it's unsafe to be close together? Nurse Roark, do you think you can answer that one?
Sure. Well, that's what the CDC guidelines state, that when possible, social distancing is recommended. And I would follow up and say that that's very, very important and also very logistically difficult to do in a school setting. So that is something that we have been taking into consideration as we look to determine when we can return face-to-face. We need to make sure that we do have practices in place to implement safe social distancing in our classrooms and hallways and common spaces, because that's perhaps the #1 mitigation strategy at this point, as recommended by the CDC.
I'm staying 6 feet apart. Thank you. How will students be held accountable for assignments and attendance? I think Mr. Gaskins, we're going back to you.
Yeah, this is a great question. I was able to sit on a high school level meeting with a secondary level. I'm sorry, it was a high school level meeting. So we're working at that guidance to communicate to families. We're also, the task force has recommended an ad hoc committee of parents, teachers, and school administrators that would also look at attendance and grading. So we would, it's a complicated, I think, topic. We want to communicate that the grading that we did back in March will not be the grading that we do as school starts. Like, students, as always, will be earning those Carnegie credits at our high schools and earning their middle school grades and the progress indicators at elementary school. We know that is a complicated way. How do you collect papers? How do you grade papers? All of those things. So we're going to turn it over to that ad hoc committee to figure out the logistics and make some recommendations to us that will come to ultimate to me and to Dr. Thomas to approve. But grading will be a serious matter. Students will be responsible and held accountable for turning in assignments. Teachers will do their best to get those grades back to students as quickly as possible so they can make revisions and improve their grades. But that is something that we hope to be able to communicate prior to the start of school, especially for our high school students, knowing that there will be no hold harmless, that those grades that you earn will be the grades that you get. And we want to make sure that they start off being very successful by being diligent with getting those assignments done.
Thank you. Y'all homework, guys. So will I be not me, but will the person this question, will they be notified if someone exhibits COVID-19 symptoms in their child's classroom or school? And what would that timeline be? Amy, this sounds like a question I think you could tackle.
No problem. Yes, you will be notified as soon as possible if there's been an exposure in your child's classroom. Confidentiality will have to be maintained, of course, in that scenario. But the timeline piece of that is why we are putting our school nurses to work as contact tracers and case investigators, because we want to make sure that our CCSD community students and staff are as protected as possible as we return.
Thank you. This is a slightly lengthy one. Will teachers be supplied with unlimited amounts of cleaning wipes? When students return, we will need to wipe down the desks, chairs, etc. often. I'm a resource teacher, so students come and go throughout the day. I will need to clean the room between each group. This will require large amounts of wipes. Dexter, Mr. Fisher, can you answer this one for them?
Yes, Lawrence, thank you. And that's a very good question. Nationwide right now, the wipes are scarce. So the process that we're going to use microfibers in our classrooms that we would provide to our teachers. So those microfibers actually last a lot longer, and we can use those to clean desks, to clean what we call touch spots that students touch on a daily basis, on a continuous basis. So we will be using microfibers, which we would give. To answer the question, yes, we will give them whatever they need to take care of their classroom.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Gasson, you kind of went over this, but just in case this question came while reviewing it from a late viewer, what are the start and end times for classes, elementary, middle, and high school, and will they all be on the same lunch break?
Right, so our elementary principals are meeting tomorrow. So these are just draft times. We wanna have them give a little feedback, but currently our elementary will be from 8:30 until 3 p.m. Our secondary, which includes our middle school and high school, will be from 9 to 3:30 p.m. And then we would do a universal lunch time from 11 to 12 p.m. for all of our early learning, elementary, middle, and high school students.
Thank you. Question, I was wondering where temperature checks take place for students. I suggest they take place as students board a bus if it hasn't been decided yet. Students won't be on the bus yet, but Nurse Roark, can you answer that one?
Sure. Due to the increasing number of asymptomatic positives, the CDC is no longer recommending building entry temperature checks. So the school district is not going to be checking temperatures at this time before students board a bus or as they walk in the building every day. It's logistically hard to do that. It requires a lot of manpower and thermometers and time. And if it's not going to effectively screen out asymptomatic positives, then it's not recommended by the CDC at this time. If that changes, we will adapt and pivot our guidelines to follow CDC recommendations. At this time, if we have an identified case in a classroom, then the school nurse will likely go in and do individualized health screenings and temperature checks for that cohort who was affected by the exposure, but we are not planning to do mass building entry temperature checks right now.
Thank you. And I do want to just make sure our audience knows, just based off that question, we are starting September 8th instruction, all digital. So please do not send your children to a bus stop. A bus will not come on September 8th. So I just want to make sure if we have any viewers who are on the side of sending their children to the bus stop on September 8th, all digital, all virtual, online learning from home. So don't have them out there waiting for it. We have a question around buildings, classrooms, and offices being tested. So have all buildings, classrooms, and offices been tested for proper air circulation and air quality? And then that's for you, probably Mr. Fisher, to answer that one.
We don't have the equipment for us to test for what we call proper air. What we do have though is we know that we are pumping fresh air into our buildings on a daily basis, but we don't have that type of equipment to test for that. It's interesting that question would come up because I did talk with a company on yesterday about monitoring the air quality in our buildings. So we will be exploring that particular device and process, see how that works. So moving forward in the future, if it's available to us and it's a possibility for us to use, we may go in that direction. But right now we are pumping fresh air into all the buildings on a continuous basis.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I actually have a follow-up for you, it looks like, and it's very technical. So only some air conditioning filters filter out the virus. What is the filter type and rating, example MERV 16, that are in our systems? Are all filters the same?
All filters are not the same. Right now we're using what we call MERV 8. And the reason we use MERV 8 is because that's the type of equipment that we have for our HVAC system. So for us, the MERV 16s would not fit the units that we have. So we use MERV 8. So we sort of in the middle of the road for the type of filter that we have. But it is a very good filter and it satisfies what we need for our HVAC system.
Okay, thank you. Nurse Amy, this is for you. Will schools who have not had a full, or Lynn, but let's go for Amy. Will schools who have not had a full-time nurse in the past now have a nurse in the building for the entire school day since they are the COVID-19 point person for the schools?
Yes, and I won't spend any time on that because I already covered it, but the district made a decision to move all part-time nurses to full-time. So every school in Clark County has a full-time school nurse.
Okay, and a quick follow-up is if that nurse becomes ill, will they immediately get another one, or how will we manage it?
I love that question so much. Thank you to whoever submitted it. You really appreciate and value the role of the school nurse in the building. So thank you. I will do my best to send sub nurses if we have a nurse illness or out for an extended number of time. I will come sit in that clinic myself and serve that school. If I don't have a sub nurse, we will do everything we can to cover the school. But at the end of the day, staffing is an issue.
Thank you. I also appreciate the school nurses, if that gets me a gift basket for Christmas. Sorry. Is there any plan, or is there a plan for the pre-K program, and will it be virtual like K-12? Mr. Gaskins, this is definitely for you.
Yep, I was just talking to Ms. Hickenbotham, who is our director of our Office of Early Learning. They will have the same virtual plan as us. She has a curriculum team that is planning right now to make sure that our students are supported through a virtual learning environment. One thing that that I want to communicate to our community is that our pre-K is on a grant. And so part of that grant is about a set number of days. So we are committed, if needed, to extending the pre-K year to make sure that they meet that grant requirement. So based on feedback from the state, our pre-K program may go a little longer in the year than our elementary programs, but of course we will try to communicate that as soon as possible to families, because we want to make sure that our pre-K students are ready for kindergarten. But our pre-K program will be virtual. Ms. Hickenbotham has a great curriculum team. I just spoke to her today. They're going to attend a training with me and some of the other teachers that will be helping us with our curriculum implementation on Monday to make sure that the pre-K program is aligned with our elementary program.
Thank you, sir. We have another question about buses. And again, just a reminder, please don't send your kids on buses, but I will ask the question. Mr. Fisher, how will social distancing guidelines be met on buses?
Well, you really can't social distance on a bus, unfortunately. That's one reason that we are requiring face masks for all our students. Most of our buses hold 72 students. We're gonna cut that down to 48. That'll be 2 to a seat. So, but we are gonna require that all our students have on masks, face covering as they come to the bus stop and get on our bus. So you really can't do social distance on the bus, but you know, we got to transport our kids, and so we're gonna try to get them to school as safely as possible.
Thank you, sir. And I do want to just go ahead and say, I know it's 7 o'clock. I appreciate you all, your patience, the panelists, our district leaders being here tonight. I do want to at least maybe take at least 1 or 2 more questions, and then we will pivot to closing. And then hopefully, again, we can maybe have another one of these, or have another avenue or forum by which we can get community questions answered. This question is around TAB, PAB, and the LSGT. So have TAB, PAB, and LSGTs been included in the decision-making process for reopening? And how are they included? Brandon, do you mind answering that one? Or do you want me to tackle it? Or
I think it might be a joint effort between you, me, and Dr. Thomas, but I can definitely speak to TAB if I could just start off.
Yeah, go for it.
The Teacher Advisory Board, we met on Monday for our kickoff meeting. We have some new members, and they gave us some feedback on our strategic plan, which is also working in the background as we start school. But they also had an opportunity to sign up from some of those ad hoc committees that we alluded to earlier. So one of those ad hoc committees is like the First Day of School campaign. There was a suggestion that we have an ad hoc committee around our ESOL students. Some of the TAB members signed up to assist Heidi Hill with creating protocols for special education. So we have not started that work just yet, but we will start that work next week with our Teacher Advisory Board being members of those teams. Food distribution, Lawrence, not to take your shine away just a little, or Dexter's, we're encouraging our TAB members to be a part of, because they know as teachers better than anyone how to engage our families to come to those bus stops to get their breakfast and their lunch. So we have engaged TAB. We also have a meeting with TAB tomorrow. As you know, and members on our panel tonight, we are going to share with them more information about our reopening plan that we plan on sharing with our school board that same night, so they can give us some feedback. TAB has done a great job of collecting and organizing some questions, some very similar questions that we have tonight. Some of those questions we had not considered. So we really appreciate them posing those questions to us. So by September 8th, we can have those answered so we can serve our kids. But I will defer to Dr. Thomas or you, Mr. Harris, for those other groups that were mentioned.
Thank you, Mr. Gaskins. So we have also, I sent an email to the leader of PAB, our Parent Advisory Board, and have requested that we have 2 members per grade band. So 2 members to represent elementary, 2 for middle, and 2 for high, to have input and voice from our Parent Advisory Board. And then Mr. Harris has done the same thing with our LSGTs. We're asking that the co-chair, the non-school administrator co-chair, join us in the same way that we've done with TAB. And all of those groups have been communicated with and given an opportunity to sign up to be a part of one of the teams that we have engaging in the work. And as Mr. Gaskins said in our meeting earlier this week, you know, there were things we hadn't thought about. So we've added 504 to special ed and looking at ESOL and gifted. So it is a lot to think about. So the more people that we have helping us to look at what we need to do, the better off we are. And just today we're talking about needing a communication to families. And Mr. Gaskins said, well, that's a great something for TAB to help us with and to help us think through what those questions need to look like so we can ensure we're getting useful information back from our families. So we have reached out to LSGTs, PAB, and TAB to ensure that we're having voice from all of our stakeholder groups in the process as we move forward with continuing plans for virtual learning and then looking for our reopening. And the reopening is, you know, one of the groups that is on there. So we will, looking at first day of school and how we approach that. So we have several teams that will be looking at a variety of issues and we have representation from a variety of groups now to help us with that work.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. That is actually a great segue towards the end of our meeting. I do have one final question that I'm hoping maybe one or two of our panelists will answer. It is not a question from our community, but it's a question for me, just as your Chief of Community Engagement Strategic Partnerships. If one or two of you all will be happy to say, what does it mean to be better every day to you in CCSD? And for our viewers, that's our tagline.
So I was going to address that with my closing, so I'll wait.
Sorry, I didn't mean to steal your thunder. Anybody else?
You and I always think alike, so I'm looking at being better together. So, so I'll let someone else speak right now.
I don't mind going. I think that everyone on this panel and all of our leaders in the district will acknowledge this has not been perfect, and it won't be perfect going forward. But we just appreciate people that are willing to let us know when we miss something in a kind way would be nice. And that's how we get better every day. We learn from our mistakes.
Thank you. Dr. Gant, do you want to answer? I see you beaming over there. I know, I said I wouldn't put you on the spot.
Yeah, you did. I would just say, sort of echo, I think what Dr. Thomas is going to say, and then also what Ms. Duke has said, is that this is a process. It's sort of what I mentioned earlier. It won't be perfect. It's a pretty traumatic situation that most families are experiencing right now. Most institutions are experiencing. And I think being better every day basically means you reevaluate and figure out, okay, what can we do better? You acknowledge, okay, whoa, that was a mistake, or that was not the best solution. And I will say that I've seen that. And I think that is something that all school districts, all boards of education, and really all institutions have to do at this point in time, because there are so many more unknowns than there are knowns. And as a result, we have to be ready for continuous improvement. And so to me, that is what being better every day means. It's not comfortable, but it's a part of, it's sort of a part of the journey and part of the circumstances.
Thank you. See, that's why I called on you, because I knew you would do well. Anyone else want to answer before we pivot to our amazing leader? All right. Well, sorry, there's a fly around me. I do want to make two quick announcements, and then we will have a closing from our interim superintendent, Dr. Sonona Thomas. Just so everyone knows, we are providing a weekly update via our website. It will be emailed out to you. Please check that weekly update. I know we were not able to get to all of your 600 plus questions. I know that was not an expectation, hopefully from anyone, that we would get through 600 questions in one evening, but we do appreciate the questions. And in all seriousness, I think the questions help us as district leaders here in the Clark County School District. It helps guide our work. It helps us to think about things that, as much as we're trying to juggle and handle to make sure we have a safe return for our staff and our students, we're human. So at the end of the day, it's very possible that one detail could get missed. And so the questions that you all submit as our community with grace. So we appreciate those folks who are submitting questions to us, who are understanding that, this job isn't easy, but we're dedicated. All the folks on this call, I mean, I've been with now since in CCSD for several years, but as a member of this group since January. And this is the hardest working group of people I've met. I mean, Saturdays, Sundays, we are up, we're texting, we're calling. Have you heard this? Have you seen that? How can we make this work for our students? So I just want to say I appreciate my colleagues here on this call. I appreciate the community members who have been patient with us, who have sent us ideas, who have been just a worthwhile of information. As Dr. Gant said, it changes every day. Every day we're continuously improving. We're asking those critical questions. We're pushing our staff, our teams. We're pushing our families. So thank you to whatever of our family members may be watching. Thank you for letting us all be borrowed in the district during the day and the evenings. So I just want to remind you, we are going to give out weekly updates in that communication. Please check your emails. Please check our website. We'll try to answer some of these additional questions in that platform. We'll be updating our FAQ and Q&A doc as well. And then the last thing I just want to remind everyone is we are still doing meals right now. So for those who have been accessing meals over the summer, that service did start back on August 27th. I know we've received some questions around, is our meals still being provided? Yes, Monday and Thursday. Am I right, Mr. Fisher? They're still out. Same model we're running this summer at Hillsman and Chase Street, as well as at the bus stop locations. So please check our website. We want to make sure your students are still getting access to the food they need to continue to learn. And I'm going to pass the torch for our closing to Dr. Zenona Thomas, our interim superintendent.
And I will not prolong the hour. I do want to thank once again Mr. Harris, Lawrence Harris for organizing this event, Mr. Harold Faison, Beth Moore, Angela Tillman from his team for helping to pull all of this together. I know it was a lot of work. It was not easy, but it's definitely been worthwhile. I hope that our community has learned something today that you didn't know and that you found value in being here. Thank you to our panelists. Some of you were with me last night. We have board meeting tomorrow night. Dr. Gant is the same. We were together last night and tonight and tomorrow, and we don't take it for granted that this work does require a lot of personal time. So thank you all for your commitment to CCSD. I just want to end very quickly by saying that my request and my ask is for grace, and that we extend each other grace, and that we recognize that this is not easy. We recognize that this is a process, as Dr. Gant has said, as Ms. Duke has said. Everyone is doing the best that they can. When I was a principal and I would have parents upset, I would remind them that no teacher gets up in the morning and comes to school and sees just how miserable they can make children. This group that's doing this work does not get up, and literally they work Saturdays and Sundays. We're up at 6 and 7 o'clock in the morning. We're up at 11 and 12 o'clock at night. And I can promise you that no one on our team comes in, even virtually, and says, let me see how many mistakes I can make today. We're all doing the very best that we can with the ever-changing information that we have. We are all committed to Clark County School District. Many of us have children like Dr. Gant and I in Clark County schools. This work is personal. Every decision that I make that impacts your child impacts my child. And so this is personal for me. It's personal for our team. So please know that everything we do the best that we can with what we have at the moment. And when we have more information, we will make a change. We will try to do better, but we just ask for grace and just know that when we make a decision, it was the best that we had at the moment. And some of you may have had better. We just didn't know that information that you had. So we don't deny that maybe there was another way. We just weren't privy to that information. And ideally, if we could talk to the parents of 14,000 children all at one time and all of the experts and get all of that, we would. But we pull from every resource that we have at our fingertips at that moment to try to make the best decision for kids. So I hope that you have been able to tell from the group here today, we're committed to this work. We care about our students. We're making decisions based on the safety of as many students and families, because this virus doesn't just stay at school, they'll bring it home. So as many people as we can, that's how we base our decisions. So we thank those of you who have been supportive. We thank those of you who are giving us suggestions and sharing concerns, because that is how we grow. And so our tagline is better every day, and our sub tagline is better together. So it takes all of us to do this work. So we thank you for being partners with us. We ask that you continue in this work with us, because CCSD is definitely better when we're all together. So thank you all for your time this evening. We appreciate you, and we look forward to continuing in this work.